Hi everyone, Some Gamer Dude here. Card frames. Some are good, some are bad, some are an easy fix. I found it something we only really think about when they change, and the feel of the game changes with it. Today, I want to bring up a few card frames with some fairly sizable problems and discuss how I'd fix them. Originally, this video was intended to be about Pokemon's card frame in particular, so let's start there. If you're a complete boomer like I am, you'll remember when Pokemon looked like this. Or this. Or if you're stuck with Pokemon for a while, like this. I think we could all agree that these cards, well, not the E-Reader ones, are aesthetically pleasing. Gen 1 is super nostalgic and has a ton of charm in its own right, while Neo is different enough to feel like a whole new world. But familiar, it also works. These both work really well. They're aesthetically pleasing cards. This is what Pokemon looks like today. They are pretty off-putting. Dare I say it, they look bad. I'd argue the Pokemon TCG has been aesthetically unpleasing for nearly its entire existence now. Even going back to my favourite era of the TCG, Generation 3, the cards look off. Like the graphic design has a flaw to it. I think it's more prominent now, but it's been there for a long time. So, why does Gen 1 and 2 work, and Generation 3 onwards not? Because the cards' colour schemes were cohesive, and now they're not. It's actually that simple. Gen 1 and 2 use a yellow outer frame and accent the card with gold. The picture border, the evolution components, the Pokedex stats, and the Pokedex entry are all framed in gold. The yellow and the gold gel well together because they're tones of the same colour, yellow. They match and give the card a cohesive feel. Compare this to Generation 3, where they start changing all the components to grey, yet keep the yellow border. They don't gel well together, they clash, and the yellow border stands out as tacky. This gets worse over time as the grey turns to silver. This isn't a problem for the ultra rare cards and never has been. Right from the start they used a silver border and it works great with the grey components. It's a cohesive design where nothing stands out as clashing with other parts of the card. The ultra rare cards look substantially better than the normal cards, to the point where I'd argue the normal cards kind of look like bootlegs by comparison. The thing is, this is only for older international cards. When Generation 3 changed the frame in Japan, it changed the border to silver. The Japanese cards look a magnitude of times better than the international editions for this reason, bar 2. The more recent localizations of the game for the Chinese and Indonesian markets use the Japanese aesthetics. They look great. It's literally night and day. For the life of me, I don't know why the international editions didn't change in Generation 3. It's most likely an internal desire for visual consistency, but I think they should have. The Chinese, Japanese, and Indonesian products are so much nicer. With easier access to Japanese cards in recent years, I'm not sure why the fandom hasn't bugged Nintendo to change the cards to be more like the Japanese version, or switch the silver to gold, make the cards cohesive again. The lesson here? Graphic design is important, and you should go with what works, even if it's over what's established. So let's move on and talk about a frame that's pretty awful in most every aspect. The current Force of Will frame. While this frame did get quite a heated reception when it was announced, most people did get used to it. This isn't to say they warmed up to it or they found positive qualities about it, but they got over it for the most part. It's still bad though. It's such a train wreck of a card frame, I'm struggling to find where to start. There is literally a laundry list of issues. The black outer frame not taking up the entire border looks weird and gives the art an odd crucifix pattern. The black frame should have been full. This would also help push full art, as more of the art would be revealed via full art. The text box is massive, though that I can excuse because the developer makes the cards with not an effect, but all the effects. It literally needs the space. The Will Wheel returning to its original shape instead of having the void cost in the center is a regression, as is the move to the icon for quick cast instead of the lightning effect. The will wheel looks like it has a growth on it, unlike the original it's emulating, which was much more organically placed. I do like the will wheel including the colour of the card though. Not sure in the execution, but I'll get to that when we talk about full art. The move of the typing to the top of the card isn't the worst decision, but the text is absolutely tiny and hard to read. They should have moved the name bar up and expanded the type bar down to give the font a larger size. The font size and choice is bad in general, especially as they leave on the white stroking from the full arts. Spoilers, full art literally just turns off 2 layers in whatever program they're using. The text is tiny and hard to read. This is largely a result of laziness, the aforementioned stroking, and the game's card design, but also because they don't seem to be using variable font sizes. I do get that, it can be annoying to have to change a card to microtext to fit it all, but the base font size isn't large enough as is. In addition to this, the removal of the effect type and keyword bubbles looks incredibly lazy, especially as it's been replaced with brackets. It looks exactly like what I believe it is. A quick copy and paste text, align image, export, turn off the layers for full art, export. Efficient, sure, and I agree efficiency is important, but it looks as lazy as it is. Aligning the bubbles takes next to no time to do manually. I speak from experience here. You set up systems naturally to help align things to make things more efficient. You don't really need to go this far in terms of laziness. So yeah, I could literally only name one thing that I would consider an improvement, and even then the old form had icons to get the colour of the card across. It didn't need this. I don't care about the more magic-inspired layouts, it's a big nothing to me. The stats were fine where they were, they are fine where they are. I mentioned this earlier, the full art is incredibly lazy. Turn off 2 layers, call it a full art. We're not removing the frame around the text, just the white background. We're not moving the text to give more art. We're not putting the character in front of the name box or giving it any type of transparency, both of which they had in the prior frame. The Kickstarter is that the promos do some of these things. They aren't perfect either, but there is more effort in them. The text frame is removed, the text is pushed down, and the character is in front of the name bar behind the name. I'd still argue they can restrain the card's colour entirely to the will wheel, but in front of the box is an improvement. It's still minimal effort. I guarantee it took less than a minute, but at least it's effort and the result is much better. The lessons here: don't leave what works and don't be lazy. People can see your laziness. So let's finish with something I touched on with Force of Will, but I think we can talk about better in a different game: text legibility. This comes in 2 different parts: base cards and full arts. You don't typically see hard to read text on base rarity, but it's not all that uncommon. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the prime example of this due to its font size. But frankly, I think Force of Will and Gate Ruler are worse. Yu-Gi-Oh's font size is obscenely small, but I don't think it's too hard to read in comparison to those games, as the font itself is well designed and legible. Force of Will's is small, thin, and uses a stroke it shouldn't, while Gate Ruler is one of the worst fonts I have ever seen. It's way too thin. I struggle to read it till it's about 4 times size. I get why, the card frame itself, but the frame honestly needed a redesign for non-Asian languages where words use more characters. Give the text more space. I might argue make the stroke slightly thicker for increased legibility too. While I think the English edition is much better than the Japanese original, the game needed further localization. Let's move on to full arts. Full arts can be hard to read at times. When Vanguard moved SP from being textured to full art, they turned off the white text box and gave the text a white stroke, something a lot of games do. This is not easy to read. Vanguard is benefited by a thicker font in comparison to games like Force of Will, Gate Ruler, or even the full arts in the recently funded Grand Archive, but it's not that much better in the grand scheme of things. However, unlike the other games we've talked about today, Vanguard isn't a story of them becoming progressively worse or not fixing things. Quite the contrary. Bushiroad reversed the text and stroke colours, giving the cards white text with a black stroke. This makes the text pop off the card better, emulating subtitles and consequently making it easier to read. This is the correct way to do full arts, especially if you're using a smaller font. Makes sense too. What is the purpose of the graphic design of subtitles? To read the text on top of an image. To do that, it needs to stand out. I do think Pokemon kind of gets away with the smaller font, and a black one at that, but that's because their font is still fairly large and legible as is. The lesson? Being able to read cards is important, not just looking nice. You need to balance everything out and again, go with what works. Today's video originally started as me talking about how bad the Pokemon TCG had become in terms of graphic design, but I wasn't happy with the video. It was insubstantial and ended abruptly. As we were having discussions on my Discord that night, I found I could use what we talked about there to expand the video into something worthwhile. So tell me your opinions. What do you find a turn off or a problem? Leave comments down below. Till next time, this has been Some Gamer Dude, and thanks for watching.